Hi, my name is Emily McGee. I am a senior English and History double major from Cabot, Arkansas, and today I'm going to be presenting my senior thesis, which is titled Inside Jobs, Historical Conspiracies and Their Effects on the Discipline of History. First, I want to establish the aim of my thesis. It has three components. First, to explain why individuals believe in conspiracy theories and why they have become so popular. Second, to discuss three of the most widely spread American historical conspiracies. And lastly, to analyze the phenomenon's effect on the discipline of history. First, let's discuss the rising belief in conspiracies. Let's establish what exactly is a conspiracy theory. The definition of the term is widely disputed among historians and other researchers. It's been very hard in recent years for them to come to a consensus of what exactly this term consists of. But the most universally accepted explanation is an explanation that places blame on a small group that act in secret for their own benefit against the common good. And so this is the definition that I have chosen to include in my thesis and to base all of my research and analyzation. So the next question may be, why do people believe in conspiracy theories? Or some may want to assume that people don't believe in conspiracy theories, or that they are a very fringe phenomenon that only encompasses a small percentage of Americans. But recent data has been released that shows that at least 60% of individuals believe that the JFK assassination involved more than one person, not just Lee Harvey Oswald, which is the um, official report released by the government and other groups. And this is from 2017, so this shows that this is recent, and it is wide. It's not just a small group of people. Um, and so after learning this information, you may ask, why do people believe in conspiracy theories? And psychologists have come up with two different explanations. The first is simplicity. The human brain tends to simplify things that are going on around them, especially if the circumstances or the events that are happening don't have a clear explanation. Things that don't have answers. And so instead of analyzing the environment and possibly discovering something that would make you uncomfortable, the human brain tends to find an easy target to conceptualize and to resolve. Um, and the second explanation is proportionality bias, which is essentially um, a cause and effect phenomenon where the brain feels that the events should equal the cause, and so for a huge atrocity, um, they seem to rationalize that what caused this should also be just as atrocious or grand as what happened. And so instead of wanting to believe that a single person or a single very small group of people um, attacked their principles or their country or whatever it may be, they want to believe that it was some grand conspiracy theory. Because of these beliefs, we have started to see consequences emerging in American culture, especially in recent years. In 2019, there were more cases of the measles than there had been since 1994. And in the same year, a poll discovered that over 40% of Americans are skeptical of vaccinations. And so that has impacted actions, not just thought. Um, Also in 2019, in May of 2019, the Federal Bureau of Investigation addressed conspiracy theories for the first time, releasing a report where they attributed several different domestic terror acts to conspiratorial thinking, and they also predicted that they would see a spike in these events in the coming 2020 election um, because of conspiracy theories that have been brewing among the general public. And a lot of people contribute this to social media, the rise of social media, the popularity of social media, how it's become a haven for these types of discussions, especially among political leaders. And one example I give in my thesis is President Donald Trump, who has over 60 million Twitter followers and who on several occasions has posted about conspiracy theories, including the one where people argue that President Obama was not an American citizen. President Trump also tweeted about the speculation that Jerry Epstein did not kill himself. Um, so it's not just the general public that is contributing to these theories, it's also major political leaders that have following in the public. So the next step is to just discuss some of the major historical conspiracy theories. The first that I discuss is the JFK assassination, and the reason why I discuss this first is because it's one of the most widely known conspiracy theories. Almost everyone knows something about the JFK assassination, whether it be true or false. And so some of the main accusations surrounding this event are that Lee Harvey Oswald did not act alone, that Oswald had ties to the Soviet Union and Cuba, and was somehow a communist spy working for one of these countries to take down the U.S. government. Oswald also spent time in New Orleans, apparently in contact with Castro-affiliated political groups. He was also in Mexico City shortly before the assassination, where apparently the CIA had no track of him, and he apparently met with Soviet leaders, and other mysterious actions were going on. Also, that some of the evidence that contributes to this idea is that eyewitnesses claim to have seen more than one shooter on the day of the assassination, and that's also in the Warren Report. One of the other popular claims is that the CIA was involved, also President Lyndon B. Johnson, that they somehow came together and created this plan to kill President Kennedy in order to put President Johnson in power. A lot of people claim that they knew about Oswald's plan beforehand and just allowed it to happen, or that they were somehow involved in orchestrating the assassination. The Warren Commission report, which came out about a year after the assassination. Before the report came out, only 29% of Americans believed that Oswald had actually acted alone. And then immediately after, another poll was conducted in which they discovered that over 80% of the American population believed that Oswald acted alone. But this wouldn't last very long as people started reading the report and apparently finding inconsistencies within their data. The most infamous is the magic bullet theory, in which they claim that the bullet which went through the president's throat also struck Texas Governor John Connally, who was riding in the car with President Kennedy at the time, even though later Governor Connally would claim that he was hit by a separate bullet from the president, even though he would support the Warren report. Also, the Zapruder footage and Watergate that would happen in the 1970s that would really damage the notoriety of the government within the population in the 1970s, and that would really start to invite more and more scrutiny surrounding this event, surrounding the government's conclusion on what actually happened. The next conspiracy that I discuss is 9/11, which we all know was a horrible event, the largest act of terrorism that America had seen, killed thousands of people, and so it would be expected that there would be criticism and speculation around the many things that happened that day. And again, I discussed some of the major ones that had been discussed over the years. The first concerns Osama bin Laden. Many speculate that bin Laden was a scapegoat of sorts for the American government in order to invade Afghanistan, and that he never was actually um, an Islamic terrorist leader, and that they have seen inconsistencies with some of the footage released of bin Laden, including him wearing rings and watches, which many claim does not follow the rules of Islam, and that men are not allowed to wear things like that. Also, in some of the other footage that was released, um, it seemed that they were out of chronological order. Specifically, one video that was released in 2004, um, bin Laden appeared older than another footage that was released in 2007. He had less gray in his hair, less wrinkles, and so a lot of theorists find this as evidence that he may be possibly that he doesn't exist, or that he isn't the ruler or leader that the U.S. government claims that he is. Um, there's also that the World Trade Centers were bombed instead of hit by the plane. There was disputes over how hot the trade centers actually got with the jet fuel and how that melted the steam, steel beams. Also, that the Pentagon was struck with a missile, not the plane, and that the hole on the side was too small for the wingspan of the plane that hit the Pentagon. There's accusations that Flight 93 was shot down instead of hijacked, and also, of course, all of these, there's underlying messages that President Bush either orchestrated it, or again, he knew about it beforehand but did nothing to stop it, so that he would have a reason to invade Afghanistan with all the intricacies of the oil industry, and that somehow he would come on top with this. And obviously there are many other details that I'm skimming over in this presentation that I go into detail in my thesis. But the main overarching theme of these conspiracy theories is that the U.S. government had involvement in it, or knew about it beforehand, did nothing about it. The last conspiracy that I talk about is Area 51, and I decided to talk about it last because out of all of them, it has been in the news most recently, and some may remember the Area 51 storming that occurred in September. Back in June, a student from California named Maddie Roberts created a Facebook event titled Area 51 Storming. Over 3 million people marked that they were interested in this event. It was marked for September 20th of 2019. In the end, only about 75 individuals came to the gates of Area 51. No one entered. There was one man that was arrested for urinating on the gates, but nothing really came about it. But what is interesting is the history behind why these people would be so interested in storming Area 51. Of course, Area 51 is a designated military testing site for space technology. In the 1970s, it would move from under the designation of the CIA to the Air Force. There would be some speculation around the area in the 1940s with the apparent UFO crashing in Roswell, New Mexico, which would eventually be disproven. And it wouldn't really come into the media until the 1980s, until a man named Bob Lazar would claim that he worked in Area 51 and he saw extraterrestrials and things like that. Also, with the publication of Extraterrestrials Among Us by George Andrews, which is a book that accused the government of knowing of extraterrestrials and keeping them in Area 51. It would become a popular book. And two most important would probably be the MJ-12 papers and also the Lear statement. The MJ-12 papers were apparently a debriefing statement from President Truman to President Eisenhower, claiming that there was a secret agency within the government that kept tabs on extraterrestrials and did transactions with extraterrestrials, and received information from them so that they could conduct cattle mutilation and human abduction and other things like that. And same with the Lear statement, even though these two would be disproven, they would become widely popular, circulated. Um, so that's where most of the speculation of Area 51 has come from. So after we've discussed some of these conspiracy theories, it's time to analyze their effect on the discipline of history. So the history of conspiracy, our modern concept of conspiracy did not emerge until the 16th century, although we do find traces in ancient Greece with comedians like Aristophanes with the war between Athens and Greece in the 5th century BC, where they do discuss like a pseudo-type conspiracy, but it's more of a personal one-on-one relationship between individuals rather than any interaction between the state. It would gain religious connotation in the 16th century with the wars of religion. Originally, the Latin conspiratio meant more of a collaboration and had more positive connotation, but during this time with the wars of religion, it would mean more of a relationship between the human and the divine with almost a um, with like demon intervention rather than any kind of positive spiritual intervention. Um, the term would shift again during the Enlightenment, and especially during the French Revolution with certain French authors, where it would gain more of the connotations that we have today with the state and with the government rather than the individuals, although during this time the term meant any kind of plot against the government at all. It didn't even have to be a conspiracy or secret, but any kind of coup or any type of event like that was termed a conspiracy. And some historians argue that there was another shift in 1945 or 1990, especially in 1945 after the concept of Social Security came about with the presidency of Franklin Roosevelt. A lot claim that that changed the relationship between the government and the individual and our conception of it. Or in 1990, where a lot of the social security of international efforts with the United Nations came about. And so a lot of historians argue that that changed the perception of the term and the relationship between conspiracy and security. The historiography, it hasn't really been addressed until recently. Favre with the Annales School proposed that there be a security study in the 1950s, but this would eventually morph into a study of Catholic confession and humans' perception of psychological security, or it also branched off into the study of political strategy and the social security connotation of that, and that started a little bit earlier than that in the late 19th and early 20th century, but would really solidify during this time, especially after the Cold War. The historians also especially point to Hofstadter, Richard Hofstadter, who published Paranoid Style in American Politics, and he really connected the political culture of the Cold War to that of anti-Catholicism and anti-Semitism of the 18th and 19th centuries. Although he didn't really study the historical narrative, but rather as a political style that transcended historical context. So he really didn't dive into conspiracy and security and how they fit into history. The real effects on the discipline in recent years haven't really been studied, although the number of history majors are declining. they are only 5 for every 1,000 degrees awarded, which is the smallest percentage that we have seen since records have been kept since the 1950s. Studies have also shown that conspiracy thoughts lead to mistrust and less political participation, and so those two things paired together, the fact that there are less and less historians there to tackle this phenomenon, but then there are more and more conspiracies being spread, is a very dangerous combination. And although in past years it has led to less political participation, many experts have predicted that possibly in the 2016 elections and even in the 2020 elections that we could see a change in that, although data has not been collected in recent years to reflect that. Many have predicted that this could be a change, and that's why many places saw a shift in the political environment because of these conspiracy theories that have been spread around. I think Richard Hofstadter says it best when he defined the difference between conspiratorial thinking and the thinking of a historian. Historians acknowledge that there have been secret societies, there have been possibly what you could consider conspiracies, there have been coups, there have been things like that that have occurred throughout history, but for those who subscribe to conspiracy thinking, all of history is a conspiracy. It is backed by individuals that have pushed things for their own agenda. They don't trust any of it, and so that is dangerous, and it's on the rise. It's something that historians need to address. To conclude my thesis, the point of my thesis was to begin a conversation. I wanted to acknowledge and confront the issues that we are experiencing, the changes that we are seeing, the ideas of conspiracies that have been in America but have progressed and multiplied in the last years. And I believe that the discipline of history is being affected by it, and it needs to adapt in order to fully study this phenomenon and to ensure its survival in the coming